Maya Carter had seen it all in her years with the FBI, but nothing prepared her for what was about to happen on that quiet evening. Driving home after a long day at the bureau, she noticed flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. With a sigh, she pulled over, confused. She hadn't been speeding. She wasn't swerving. What could this possibly be about? A tall, burly officer approached her car with an arrogant smirk. His uniform was slightly wrinkled, and the way he walked screamed unchecked authority. Maya had dealt with men like him before, officers who thrived on intimidation. "License and registration," he barked. Maya remained calm, reaching into her glove compartment. "Officer, can I ask what the issue is?" The cop, whose name tag read Officer Daniels, chuckled. "Driving a little too nice of a car, don't you think?" His eyes scanned her sleek black Mercedes, suspicion dripping from his tone. Maya's grip tightened on the wheel. She knew exactly what this was: racial profiling. It wasn't the first time, and unfortunately it wouldn't be the last. She handed over her license and registration, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. Daniels snatched them from her hand, barely glancing at the documents before narrowing his eyes. "FBI, huh?" he scoffed, flipping the badge carelessly in his hand. "Yeah, right." Before she could respond, he did something unthinkable. With a smirk, he unclipped his holster and pulled out his gun, aiming it straight at her. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Civilians might have panicked, but she wasn't just any civilian. She was a federal agent. "You think a fake badge is going to get you out of this?" Daniels sneered. Maya's lips curled into a knowing smile, her heartbeat steady. "He has no idea who he's dealing with. Officer," she said slowly, locking eyes with him, "you just made the biggest mistake of your career." Officer Daniels kept his gun trained on Maya, his finger dangerously close to the trigger. His smirk hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown wider. "You think I don't know a fake when I see one?" he mocked, waving her FBI badge in the air. "Lady, I don't know where you got this, but it sure as hell ain't real." Maya kept her hands on the steering wheel, her calm demeanor unshaken. She had handled high-risk arrests, taken down criminal masterminds, and infiltrated dangerous organizations. But standing before her was an officer so blinded by arrogance and bias that he was willing to put his entire career at risk for a moment of power. "You're making a mistake, Officer Daniels," Maya said evenly. "That badge is very real, and if you don't put that gun down, you'll regret it." Daniels let out a laugh, shaking his head. "Is that a threat?" "No," she said, her tone measured. "It's a fact." But Daniels wasn't listening. Instead, he reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I got a suspect here claiming to be an FBI agent. She's got fake credentials and is refusing to comply." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Fake credentials?" Oh, he was in for a rude awakening. "Do you even realize what you've done?" she asked, tilting her head. "Pulling a weapon on a federal agent? That's an automatic felony." Daniels rolled his eyes. Yeah, save it for the judge." Maya sighed. This wasn't the first time she had dealt with a power-hungry officer, but it was the first time one had been this stupid. Reaching into her pocket, slowly, deliberately, she pulled out her phone. Daniels tensed, his gun shaking slightly. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he growled. Maya ignored him. With a quick tap, she activated her emergency alert. Within seconds, her FBI colleagues, high-ranking ones at that, would be on their way. Daniels saw the movement and lunged. "I said, don't." But before he could finish his sentence, Maya's phone buzzed. A voice rang out from the speaker. "Agent Carter, are you in distress? We have your location. Backup is inbound." Daniel's smirk faltered. His face paled. Maya finally let a small, knowing smile cross her lips. "Tick-tock, officer." Officer Daniels' grip on his gun faltered for just a second, but Maya didn't miss it. That moment of hesitation, of realization, was all she needed to know he had made the worst mistake of his career. The voice on her phone repeated the message. "Agent Carter, confirm your status. Are you in immediate danger?" Daniel's face twitched. The laughter was gone now. His eyes darted to the badge still in his other hand, as if he were seeing it for the first time. His radio crackled to life. "All units, stand by. Possible federal agent on scene. Await confirmation." Maya remained perfectly still. She had nothing to fear. Daniels, on the other hand, was realizing just how deep he had sunk. You're bluffing," he muttered, though there was no confidence in his words. Maya tilted her head slightly. "Am I?" She saw the way his fingers tensed on the grip of his weapon. He was panicking, and panicked men with guns were dangerous. "Put it down, Daniels," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Right now, the only way you're walking away from this with your badge is if you make the right decision in the next 10 seconds. His nostrils flared. "You think you can tell me what to do? I don't have to." Maya glanced down at her phone, where she could already hear approaching sirens in the background. "My team will be here any second. You have one chance to not make this worse for yourself." Daniel's breathing was coming faster now. He turned to look around, as if searching for a way out. The parking lot, which had once felt like his territory, now felt like a trap. Maya could see the sweat forming on his brow. He was realizing it now, the weight of what he'd done. He had pulled a gun on an FBI agent, and soon everyone would know. Before she could say another word, the distant sirens grew louder. The flashing lights of black SUVs appeared at the entrance of the parking lot. Daniels swallowed hard. Maya met his eyes, her gaze unwavering. "Time's up." The black SUVs screeched to a halt, their tires kicking up dust as the doors swung open in unison. Several agents in dark suits and tactical vests stepped out, their weapons drawn, eyes locked on Officer Daniels. Maya remained still, her arms crossed as she watched the scene unfold. "Drop the weapon! Hands in the air!" one of the agents barked. Daniels hesitated for just a second too long. His knuckles were white around the grip of his gun, his body frozen in place. The reality of the situation was sinking in, but his pride was fighting against it. "I said drop it," the agent yelled again, stepping forward. Finally, as if his body had made the decision before his mind, Daniels let the gun slip from his fingers. It clattered against the pavement, the metallic sound echoing in the tense silence. Another agent, a tall, broad-shouldered man, stepped forward and yanked Daniels' hands behind his back. The officer let out a sharp breath as the cold steel of handcuffs snapped around his wrists. "This is a mistake," Daniels gritted out, his voice low, shaking with rage. "Oh, it is," Maya said, stepping closer, her tone sharp as a blade. "But it's your mistake." The agents moved quickly, securing the area while one of them retrieved Maya's badge from the ground. He handed it to her with a nod. "Agent Carter, are you all right?" Maya smirked slightly, taking the badge and brushing off the dust. "I'm just fine, but he has a lot to answer for." Daniels struggled against the agents, his jaw clenched tight. "You think you can do this to me? I'm a cop. You can't just—" Maya cut him off, her voice steady. "You think that badge makes you untouchable?" She gestured to his uniform. "You used it to intimidate, to threaten, and now it won't protect you." The other officers who had once stood behind Daniels were silent now, watching in shock. None of them moved to defend him. Maya turned to one of the agents. "Get him in the car. I want him booked and processed immediately." As they pulled Daniels toward the SUV, Maya took a deep breath. This was only the beginning. The flashing red and blue lights bathed the street in an eerie glow as Officer Daniels was shoved into the back of the black SUV. His face was contorted with anger, his jaw clenched so tightly that the veins in his neck bulged. He struggled against the cuffs, but the agents held him firm. "You're making a damn mistake," Daniels spat. "This is unlawful arrest. I was just doing my job." Maya Carter took a slow step toward the car, her piercing gaze locking onto his. "Your job?" she echoed, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Your job is to protect and serve, not to abuse and terrorize." She leaned in slightly, just enough to make sure he felt the weight of her words. "You pulled a gun on a federal agent, Daniels, and then you laughed at my badge like it was a joke. Guess what? The only joke here is you." The other officers stood frozen, their expressions a mix of shock, fear, and uncertainty. Some of them shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing just how deep their fellow officer had sunk. Captain Reynolds, a veteran officer with graying hair and sharp eyes, finally pushed his way through the gathered cops. His face was unreadable as he looked at Maya, then at Daniels in the back seat. "Agent Carter," Reynolds said, clearing his throat. I didn't know." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Didn't know what?" The captain exhaled sharply. "Didn't know who you were. Didn't know this was how Daniels was handling things." His voice was gruff, but there was a hint of something in it. Maybe regret. Maybe shame. Maya tilted her head slightly. "And what would you have done if I wasn't FBI? If I were just another black woman driving home?" Reynolds didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was answer enough. Maya let out a slow breath, then turned to the lead agent handling Daniel's arrest. "Get him out of here," she ordered. "Let's see how funny he thinks this is in a holding cell." As the SUV's doors slammed shut and the vehicle pulled away, Maya turned back to the remaining officers. "You have a problem in your department," she said, her voice firm. "And if you don't fix it, I promise you, I will." The weight of her words settled over the group like a heavy storm cloud. Nobody dared to speak. Maya took one last glance at the street where it all happened, then walked toward her car. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Maya Carter sat at her desk in the FBI field office, her fingers drumming rhythmically against the wooden surface. The events of the night replayed in her mind like a bad dream. Officer Daniels pulling his gun, the mocking laughter, the sheer arrogance in his eyes. But now he was behind bars, at least temporarily. The real question was, how deep did the corruption run? A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Special Agent Cole, one of her most trusted colleagues. He stepped inside, holding a manila folder thick with documents. His expression was serious. "Maya, you were right to suspect something bigger," he said, setting the folder down. "I pulled internal complaints on Daniels. He's been accused of excessive force 6 times in the last 3 years. Every single case, dismissed." Maya clenched her jaw. "Let me guess, witnesses intimidated, evidence lost?" Cole nodded. "Exactly. And it's not just Daniels. I found similar patterns with at least 4 other officers in his precinct. It looks like they have a system in place to cover for each other." Maya opened the folder and scanned the reports. The same names kept appearing: Daniels, Officer Reynolds, Officer Blake, and Lieutenant Mitchell. She recognized some of the complainants' names, too. Black and brown residents who had been mistreated but never saw justice. "This isn't just about one bad cop," she murmured. "This is a network," Cole sighed. "It gets worse. The precinct's internal affairs division? It's a joke. The officers investigating misconduct complaints are the same ones covering it up." Maya leaned back in her chair, exhaling sharply. She had dealt with corruption before, but this was systemic. This was intentional. "We need to bring this to the U.S. Attorney's Office," she said. "We need federal oversight. If we go through normal channels, they'll just bury it again." Cole hesitated. "That's going to rattle a lot of cages, Maya." "Good," she said, standing up and grabbing her coat. "Let's start shaking." The battle wasn't just about Daniels anymore. This was about taking down an entire system of abuse and ensuring it could never happen again. As she and Cole walked out of the office, Maya knew this fight was only just beginning. Maya Carter and Special Agent Cole arrived at the U.S. Attorney's Office early the next morning. They knew this wasn't going to be easy. Exposing police corruption was like walking into a hornet's nest, dangerous and unpredictable. But Maya wasn't the kind of woman to back down. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Hendricks met them in a sleek conference room lined with case files. She was a sharp, no-nonsense prosecutor who had taken down dirty cops before. As soon as Maya and Cole laid the evidence on the table, Rachel's eyebrows lifted. "This is worse than I expected," Rachel said, flipping through the documents. 6 dismissed complaints against Daniels, 4 officers consistently involved, and an internal affairs division that's covering for them. This is deep. Maya nodded. "It's a whole system protecting itself. If we don't act fast, they'll bury the evidence before we can move." Rachel sighed, rubbing her temple. "We can't just walk in and start making arrests. We need a solid case, one they can't wiggle out of. If we go to trial with weak evidence, these guys will walk, and we'll never get another chance." Cole leaned forward. "Then we need an insider, someone from the department who's willing to talk." Rachel hesitated. "Do you have anyone in mind?" Maya exhaled. There was one possibility. "Officer Miguel Alvarez. He's been with the department for 6 years. I worked with him before I joined the FBI. He's a good cop, but I think he's stuck in the system. If we can get to him, we might have a shot." Rachel nodded. "If he flips, we'll have a witness with first-hand knowledge. But if he refuses—" Maya finished her sentence. "Then he might warn them, and we'll lose everything." Rachel closed the folder. "We don't have a choice. Set up a meeting. Let's see where Alvarez stands." Maya and Cole exchanged glances. They were about to test the loyalty of a cop caught between his duty and a corrupt brotherhood. If he sided with them, they had a chance. If not, things could get dangerous. fast. Maya Carter and Special Agent Cole sat in a quiet corner booth at a small diner just outside the city. The smell of coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, but neither of them was in the mood for breakfast. Their eyes were locked on the door, waiting for Officer Miguel Alvarez to arrive. "This could go south real fast," Cole muttered, stirring his black coffee. "If Alvarez is loyal to them, we're tipping our hand way too soon." Maya nodded. "I know, but we need someone on the inside. If we don't get him to talk, we're back to square one." A few minutes later, the bell over the door jingled, and Alvarez stepped inside. He was dressed in plain clothes, but the way he carried himself screamed cop. He scanned the room before walking toward their table, his jaw tight with tension. "Maya," he greeted, sliding into the booth across from them. His voice was low, cautious. "What's this about? I had to make sure no one followed me." Maya leaned forward. "We need your help, Miguel. You know what's happening inside the department. Daniels and his crew have been getting away with this for years." Alvarez let out a slow breath, rubbing his hands together. "You don't think I know that? I've seen things I wish I hadn't. But you don't understand. Going against them is career suicide, maybe worse." Cole placed a file in front of him. "We have proof, Miguel. Complaints that were buried. Victims too scared to come forward. But it's not enough. We need someone from the inside, someone who can confirm everything." Alvarez hesitated. "If I testify, my life is over. They'll come after me, my family. They protect their own and anyone who turns against them." He trailed off, shaking his head. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a second folder. "We can protect you, Miguel. But if we don't stop them now, they're only going to get bolder. How long before they hurt someone you care about?" He swallowed hard, his eyes filled with conflict. He knew she was right. He had seen enough to know that one day Daniel's unchecked power would lead to something far worse. After a long silence, Alvarez finally spoke. "I'll do it." His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of a man who had just crossed a line he could never come back from. Maya exhaled. "Good. We need a detailed report, names, dates, incidents, anything you can give us." Alvarez nodded. "I'll get you what I can, but you need to move fast. If they find out what I'm doing, they won't just fire me, they'll bury me." Maya met his gaze. "Then we'll make sure they don't get the chance." They had their insider. Now, it was time to bring the house down. Maya and Cole left the diner with a sense of urgency hanging in the air. They finally had an insider, Officer Miguel Alvarez, but his warning rang in their ears. If Daniels and his crew caught wind of what he was doing, he wouldn't just lose his job. He'd be in serious danger. "We need to be careful," Cole said as they walked toward their car. "If Daniels even suspects Alvarez is working with us, we won't have a case. We'll have a dead witness." Maya nodded, her mind racing. "We'll have Alvarez submit the reports through an encrypted channel. No direct contact after today, and we'll use burner phones. No emails, no texts." Cole let out a slow breath. "You think he'll actually follow through?" Maya stared ahead. "He has to." Meanwhile, inside the police station, Officer Daniels leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone with a smirk. His network was tight. Every whisper in the department eventually found its way to him. A young officer hesitated before stepping into his office. Sir, I overheard something." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "Go on." The officer swallowed hard. "I think Miguel Alvarez met with someone this morning, looked like an FBI agent." Daniels sat up. "You think or you know?" The young officer hesitated. "I'm not sure, but he was acting nervous, checking over his shoulder when he left." Daniels smirked, but there was a dangerous gleam in his eyes. "You did good, kid. Keep your ears open. If Alvarez is sniffing around, I want to know exactly who he's talking to." The officer nodded and left, leaving Daniels deep in thought. If Alvarez was flipping, that meant trouble. But Daniels wasn't about to let some rat ruin everything he'd built. Reaching for his phone, he dialed a number. "We might have a problem," he muttered. "I need you to follow Alvarez, and if he steps out of line, handle it." Back to Maya and Cole. Maya's phone buzzed. She checked the message from Alvarez. "Got what you need, but I think they're on to me." Cole saw her expression shift. "What is it?" Maya's jaw tightened. "We're running out of time." Maya's fingers tightened around her phone as she read Alvarez's message again. "Got what you need, but I think they're on to me." That wasn't just a warning, it was a ticking time bomb. We need to move fast, she said, looking at Cole. If Daniels suspects Alvarez, he won't waste time. We have to get him somewhere safe. Cole nodded. We'll set up a meet, but we do it smart. If they're watching him, we can't just walk into a trap. Maya thought for a moment before texting Alvarez. New plan. Don't go home. Don't go back to the station. Head to the location I send you, now. She quickly dropped a pin for a secure FBI safe house outside the city. It was discreet, off the grid, somewhere Daniels wouldn't find him easily. Alvarez responded immediately. On my way. Maya let out a breath, but the tension in her chest didn't ease. Meanwhile, Daniels watched from his unmarked car as Alvarez pulled out of the station's parking lot. He had expected the rat to act jittery, but leaving in a hurry like that was confirmation enough. He tapped a number on his phone. Follow him, he ordered. Wherever he's going, I want to know. A deep voice on the other end chuckled. Don't worry, we got him. Daniels hung up and smirked. Alvarez thought he was clever, but he had just led them straight to whoever he was working with. The chase begins. Alvarez glanced at his rearview mirror and immediately felt his stomach drop. 2 black SUVs. No lights, no sirens, but staying just close enough to follow. Damn it, he muttered. He had expected them to be suspicious, but he had hoped to get more distance before they caught on. His phone buzzed. Maya, are you being followed? He hesitated, then texted back. Yes, 2 cars, unmarked. What do I do? Seconds later, another text. Don't go to the safe house. Go to the alternate location. Sending it now. A new pin appeared on his map, rerouting him to an abandoned warehouse on the east side of town. Alvarez's hands clenched the steering wheel. He had no idea what Maya's plan was, but right now she was his only hope. Meanwhile, Maya and Cole were already moving. This is it, she said, loading her gun. We end this tonight. Alvarez's heart pounded as he sped toward the warehouse. The SUVs were closing in, their drivers realizing he wasn't going straight home. He had to lose them, fast. Maya and Cole were already in position, watching the GPS tracker she had slipped into Alvarez's car earlier. He's got company, Cole muttered, spotting the 2 black SUVs on the screen. Maya's jaw tightened. Then we make sure they don't leave. The warehouse trap. Alvarez swerved into the warehouse's lot, tires screeching against the pavement. He barely had time to slam his car into park before the SUVs pulled in behind him, blocking his exit. 2 men stepped out, both in plain clothes, but everything about them screamed police. They weren't here to ask questions. Alvarez, one of them sneered. You really think you could run? Alvarez kept his hands up. I don't know what you're talking about. The second man scoffed. Daniels warned you not to stick your nose where it doesn't belong. And yet, here we are. A gun cocked. Alvarez's stomach twisted, but before anyone could make a move, bang! A single shot echoed through the warehouse, striking the ground near the men's feet. Drop your weapons, Maya's voice rang out. From the shadows, she and Cole stepped forward, their guns drawn. The 2 dirty cops froze, realizing they were caught. One of them cursed. FBI? Maya smirked. Surprise. Cole motioned to Alvarez. Get behind us, now. Alvarez didn't hesitate. He rushed toward Maya and Cole as the 2 officers slowly raised their hands. Daniels had sent these guys to clean up loose ends, but instead they had walked straight into Maya's trap. Where's Daniels? Maya demanded. One of the officers clenched his jaw. Go to hell. Maya glanced at Cole. Guess we'll have to make him talk. Cole cracked his knuckles. With pleasure. The real fight was just beginning. Maya kept her gun trained on the corrupt officers, her finger steady on the trigger. Cole stepped forward, his voice cold. You have 2 options, he said. You tell us where Daniels is, or we make sure you go down with him. One of the officers, a tall man with a scar on his cheek, chuckled bitterly. You really think you've won? Daniels is untouchable. Maya smirked. You're stalling. She nodded to Alvarez, who pulled out his phone and hit a button. Suddenly, the warehouse was filled with the crackling sound of a recorded conversation, one of Daniels' men confessing to the entire operation. The corrupt officers' faces drained of color. Maya leaned in. FBI's been watching you for weeks. Every call, every meeting, every dirty deal. It's all recorded. Scarface gritted his teeth. You don't have proof. Alvarez held up his phone. You just heard it, didn't you? For the first time, real fear flickered in their eyes. Suddenly, sirens blared outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the warehouse windows. Maya grinned. Looks like your ride is here. The warehouse doors burst open, and a team of federal agents stormed in. Within seconds, the two officers were disarmed and cuffed. As they were dragged away, Maya turned to Alvarez. "You did good." Alvarez exhaled, still shaken. "I almost got myself killed." Cole clapped him on the back. "But you didn't. And now we take down Daniels." Maya's eyes darkened. This was just the beginning. As the officers were shoved into police cars, Maya stared at the horizon. She knew Daniels wouldn't go down without a fight. But she was ready. Justice was coming. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping tales of justice and redemption. What would you have done in Maya's situation? Comment below and let's discuss. Want more stories like this? Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Justice always finds its way. Stay tuned for the next thrilling story.